At what point does the manual testing completely break down?
Yeah, manual testing is good to start, but as soon as you really want to scale the testing and you want to do more than 80 transactions in a couple of days or in a day, then you need to get into automation. Because with automation, you're capable to run around 80 to 100 transactions per hour, and you can now really scale this. So imagine you would then test overnight. You start a test run on one payment terminal with a point of sale. You can suddenly do 600-700 transactions overnight, which is impossible for a human to achieve in the same quality and same repeatability as the automation does it for you. So if you really want to scale and be faster in your releases, you need to consider automation.
So would you say that's the tipping point? If the number is more than 80, then you should be thinking about automation?
Yeah, it depends on what you want to do. If you are happy with just your 50 test cases and you're confident that your releases are good, then yeah, automation might not be the way. But if you only have one payment terminal, it might also be good enough to test it manually. But as soon as you want to get really into a regular release cycle, you need to have something different in place. So I can give you an example from a customer of ours. We have a case study with them. They were testing, so their release cycle was 6 months, and their testing took around 2 months to be completed. So they were developing for 4 months and then did a test cycle for 2 months before they could release. Now, this is really not scalable because your customers expect you to deliver your payment software faster than just twice a year. So with the implementation of automation, they were able to cut down the release cycle time to 3 times a week with one major release in a month. And that's only possible with automation because now they went into this, what we call a CI/CD pipeline, so continuous integration, continuous deployment. They test overnight, and then in the morning they check their results, they continue to develop, and then test overnight again. If you want to be in that state, then you need automation. If you're happy with 6-month releases and your customers don't complain, manual might still be the right way for you, but it's not future-proof, right?
You make a very good point about, I guess, fatigue, and you will rarely have somebody that will be working overnight doing the testing, right? So how much of the issue in all of this is the human fatigue?
Yeah, imagine you have to do 100 times exactly the same transaction because you would like to do a stress testing. You're very easily distracted, right? So you might take up the wrong card, you might press a different flow on the terminal, you might get tired, and then the quality of your testing is just not the same as if you have automation with robots, which are very repetitive. The percentage there, which we see, is around 5% of failures in manual testing. So that's a real number and a real risk you have. And with automation, you can basically limit that down to 0 because the robot always follows exactly the same script and exactly the same flow, which makes it really unique for your testing.
And what changes when businesses can run regression tests overnight instead?
Yeah, as I mentioned with the case study with that customer, it's really nice because now you are able to see already in the development department what's happening in testing. So let me take a bit of picture here. If you test today, it's very often isolated in the quality department. But why don't you extend the testing already to the development department? So give them access to the same testing equipment, and then the team which develops, they can already run test cases during the development process. And once they're done and confident to release, then they can give the whole software, which is pre-tested, to the Q&A team, which does a more extensive test afterwards. So they can rerun all the tests, they can add additional test coverage, or they can just do some manual edge case, which you don't automate with the robot. But if you integrate it into a more broader spectrum in the company, you really have then the benefits of automation.
Sure. And I guess on the mentioned benefits of automation, benefits of testing, what is the real cost of testing going wrong?
Yeah, there's a great study being published every year based here in the UK. The real loss of payments which are down in retail is to be estimated around 1.7 billion pounds for, that was 2025, and that's an increase from 1.5 million in 2024. Out of that, around 25% is really linked to issues with the point of sale and the payment terminal. So that's around 450 million pounds, which is massive. If you could reduce that number by 10%, you would save 45 million pounds. So why don't you invest a bit of money into automation and proper test coverage, but on the other hand, you save a lot of money because you don't have downtime and you have a better customer experience. If your store is always up and running and you can take all the payments, your customers will also always return. But if you, on the other hand, have a downtime during Christmas and you can't take any payments, you easily lose hundred thousands of revenue if you're a big merchant, right? This should be prevented, and that's the cost. But this is really hard to track. How do you measure that number if you don't have a downtime?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess people obviously look at the downtime and potential loss of revenue. But do you think the retailers actually underestimate the reputational damage of payments stopping?
Yeah, but this is really hard to measure, right? And it's hypothetical. So if the retailers assume my payment is always up and running, it's good. But once you're down, then the damage happens. And how much damage happens there, that's really hard to track. But if you are down during a very important time of the year and people can come and buy and you have backlash in the press, that costs you more than investing into the testing.
You mentioned some peak times. We've heard from some of our partners and clients that they even have engineers being on site for the peak days around the Christmas time. Is it something that you guys see as well?
Yeah, you can simulate that behavior already before Christmas, right? You can do load testing with your hardware once you have the robot, because you now can just rerun transactions all the time. You can stress test your terminal 24/7 and really see how it behaves. So you make sure that when the peak time arrives, that you are in a good state where you don't expect any issues.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously that sometimes the ROI is difficult to capture because unless something goes wrong, it's then very difficult to prove. Yeah. So how do you help payment leaders measure ROI of testing?
Yeah, I'm just working right now on a new approach on how to calculate the ROI, depending on with whom we are talking to, right? There's different interest groups. So if you talk to the head of quality, they're interested in how many bugs they're able to capture before it goes into the release. And here we assign a hypothetical cost of failure if you release to the store. So some customers might have historical data, meaning they released the bug, they had a downtime, they know we were down for an hour, this cost us £1 million, and then you can calculate the cost of failure. If you have that available, then it's super easy to justify the cost, because then you can say, okay, we found 10 bugs with automation, each bug saved us $50,000, $500,000, and yeah, it's positive ROI, right? If you are, on the other hand, the head of software, you're more interested in the release cycle time, and then we need to focus on how fast are we able to test and how does that compare to a human. So here we have as a benchmark the 80 to 100 test cases per hour, depending on how complex your test cases are. But that's also then a super easy math to do, because you just take this, let's say 80 test cases an hour, you have an average day of 8 hours, so that's 640 tests you could run in one shift, and then you compare that to a human, which might be able to run 80 to 150 test cases in a day with also the reporting and everything. And then, yeah, you can calculate how fast it will take you to do the release. And on the other hand, the third party which we're looking at is the CEO, right? And he's most likely just interested in cash. So how much does both save? Then you have the savings from software releases, which are more frequent. You have the saving from bugs, which you don't release into the store. And then this together gives you a commercial return of invest.
And you've been clearly involved in a lot of different projects. And what would you say stands out for the projects that you would describe as a gold standard. What made them very successful? And then on the flip side, what were the projects that we were involved that you wish you'd never got involved in?
Yeah, so what makes it successful is if you are open to transformation, because the testing between manual and automation is different, and it will change the way you work today. With automation, you have to think about more what are all the scenarios we have to cover and where do we start to make this a smooth process. If people are really open to engage with us in that area, then we have most often a really good project together, because we can guide them into where to start, how to build a proper test case coverage, and customers have within a couple of months really positive results afterwards. So we recently rolled out a retailer in the US. They have 1,500 fuel stations, so quite a number. And within 2 weeks, they already found 3 bugs, which were undetected in their software. So that was a super easy and quick win for both of us afterwards, because once we could prove, hey, okay, this really works, you're able to automate it and to find bugs, they were super happy and are now growing the solution with us together. So openness is the key. On the other hand, often if we speak with testing people, they're sometimes afraid, of robotics and automation. It sounds like I'm being made redundant, which is not the case. The robot doesn't come in and take your job and then you're out. That's not happening. Somebody still needs to write the test cases, to maintain the robot a little bit, and to analyze afterwards. Because now, what you did in a day can be done in an hour, and you multiply that. So if you run 800 tests in a day, the amount of logs and data you receive from that is huge. But if you are afraid that the robot comes and takes my job, then there's always a blockage already, which we have to overcome.
Sure, and I guess that dovetails very nicely into my next question. Are people afraid that your guys are coming in and then replacing their jobs? But from what you are saying is you are enabling people to be better at their job rather than replacing them with machines.
Yeah, who wants to do that? Who wants to sit in front of a payment terminal and do transaction all day? This is not something which is an effective use of your time. I understand that it has been done manually. There was no other way to do that. But we are now working in this space for almost a decade. And we know our business, and we know that this is proven to work. And very often when we come and work with teams, the people which used to work with the rope or with the payment terminal manually and they were afraid of, they were afterwards super happy, because they're still around, they're still testing, but they're not doing the manual test execution anymore. That's the only part which we take away, the manual execution of your test cases. You still do your core business. You are still here to think about what would be a great test case to do, and what do I do afterwards with all my logs, and where's the bug hiding, and why is it happening? That's then your job afterwards, but not inserting, tapping and swiping cards.